Hello everybody, and welcome to Week 7 of Extra Points, a production of Delphi Bracketology and Student Union Sports. My name is Dave Gilbert, and I'm joined by senior Catherine Lang this week. Let's recap some of the big stories from this past weekend's games. The biggest shocker of the week was Iowa State, a 30-point underdog, going on the road in Norman and knocking off number 3 Sooners. Then giving Baker Mayfield a little taste of his own medicine by planting their flag in the logo at the center of the field. We also saw one of the craziest games in college football history as Western Michigan defeated Buffalo 71-68 in 7 overtimes. That may be higher scoring than when these two teams meet during the basketball season. I also thought it was a classy move by Purdue coach Jeff Brom to call a bubble screen on the very first offensive play for Purdue in memory of legendary Purdue coach Joe Tiller. What stood out to you this past weekend, Catherine?
We saw some interesting results this week, including the upset of number 24 North Carolina State over 17 Louisville and Lamar Jackson, and Michigan State pulling off yet another victory over the talented Michigan team. We also saw Ohio State handle their business against Maryland.
Our game of the week this week is the Red River Shootout between Texas and Oklahoma. For more on this game, let's send it to Evan Fritz and Jordan Rock.
Welcome back, college football fans, and thanks for joining us for the Week 7 Game of the Week. This week, we're going to be looking at the 3-2 Longhorns versus the 4-1 Oklahoma Sooners. This week, I'll be covering the Longhorns, and Jordan here will be covering the Sooners. All right, so for the Longhorns' point of view, you're definitely going to want to be on the ground because you scored 11 out of 19 of your total season touchdowns on the ground. You're going to look for Chris Warren and Sam Ehlinger to have a big impact on this game, for they've had 1,400 total season yards together and a total of 9 touchdowns. They're a big impact on the offense, but you're really going to need the defense to put some stops together in the first half. You're going to look to Deshaun Elliott, who has 5 picks in the first 4 games of the series. And you're also going to look to Malik Jackson, who has 47 tackles on the year, which is leading his team. And now I'm going to send it over to Jordan here to see what the Sooners have to do to take this game.
What a stunner, as Oklahoma took a loss last week versus Iowa State. Hopefully they can come back this week and beat the Texas Longhorns, who have been playing well lately. But to win versus Longhorns, the Sooners will have to play good all 4 quarters, not just the first half like last week. Baker Mayfield, a Heisman candidate, at 306 yards on 22 of 33 passing through the air, with 2 touchdowns. To beat the Longhorns, though, they have to be clicking on all cylinders. Running back Trey Sermon ran for 90 yards on 18 carries last week. He is an explosive running back to watch. But the defense can't allow Texas to have the big plays like Kansas State did. So don't let Texas have the big state and let Baker Mayfield do his thing, and the Sooners will be all right.
That's all we have for this week's Game of the Week. Thanks for joining us, and make sure to come back next week for the Week 8 Game of the Week.
Guys, it's always a great matchup between these two teams at the Cotton Bowl. For our Hey, That's Not Cool segment, we send it to Michael Benner.
Hi, this is Michael Benner, and I am here for your Hey, That's Not Cool of the Week segment. This week we go to Florida, where some of the fans were not happy about some of the uniforms that Florida will be wearing this week against Texas A&M. Some of the fans took to Twitter and said, please take these uniforms, put them in a nice pile, and set them on fire. And another one said, is this April Fool's Day? My calendar says October 9th, but it's April Fool's Day, right?
Thanks, Michael. Now it's time to see who's hot and who's cold in college football. For that, we send it to Jonas Brown and Joe Lammers.
Hello, my name is Jonas Brown. I'm a junior at Delphi, and this is
Joe Lammers.
And we're going to be doing the hot and cold segment. Joe, take it away with the cold.
Oklahoma lost by 38-31 against unranked Iowa, even though they were up by 14 in the late second quarter. They better start getting hot again because Texas is coming up next. But for this week, Oklahoma, led by Heisman candidate Baker Mayfield, is colder than liquid nitrogen.
For the hot, Penn State is on a 6-game winning streak, and NC State won over Louisville 39-25, and they're as hot as a nuclear reactor.
Thanks, guys. Losing at home when you're the number 3 team in the country and favored by 30 points is downright chilly.
Now for our interesting fact and questionable call of the week, we send it to Colt Spangler.
Thanks, guys. Hi, it's Colt Spangler here with your interesting fact. According to the CBS college football rankings, Michigan has dropped 12 spots to 20, coming off the loss to Michigan State. If Jim Harbaugh wants to make it to the playoffs, he better get his act together. Hi, here with your questionable call of the week. This week it comes from LSU in the Florida game. Duke Dawson from Florida blatantly sapped Russell Gage from LSU, and there was no call on play. Really questionable there.
Thanks, Colt. Michigan really has its work cut out to get back into the playoff picture. It's time to see how Heisman race is shaping up. What's it look like this week, Jameson?
Saquon Barkley retains the number one spot for another week. Despite modest rushing yards, his all-purpose yards are winning him a lot of recognition in the race. Baker Mayfield had another solid showing in the Sooners' upset loss to Iowa State. He put up 306 yards and threw 2 touchdown passes. Bryce Love sits in the middle of the top 5 again this week. The Cardinal rusher ran for 152 yards and a touchdown in Stanford's upset of number 20 Utah. At number 4, Luke Falk threw for 282 yards and 3 touchdowns in Washington State's first road game of the season. The Cougars remain undefeated. Minkah Fitzpatrick leads the defense of the nation's number 1 ranked team, so the Alabama defensive back got some attention this week and comes in at number 5. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thanks, Jameson. Barkley really seems to be running away with the Heisman early on this season. Let's see who's on the hot seat. For that, we send it to Elijah Hudson.
On this week's coaching hot seat, we have Bobby Petrino of Louisville. They are currently standing at 4-2 after a loss to fellow ranked opponent NC State. That seems to be the problem this year for Louisville, though, a rising in competitive games. They haven't won a single game this season against a ranked opponent, and it looks like it might stay that way. Coach Petrino, you're on the hot seat.
Thanks, Elijah. If the Cardinals don't start winning some big games, Petrino could be the next Louisville coach sent packing. This week we have a reporter on site at the Cotton Bowl for more on the Red River shootout. We now send it to Garrett Thompson.
Junior Garrett Thompson here reporting all the way down in Dallas, Texas. Now, this week we have the Red River rivalry game between the 4-1 Sooners and the 3-2 Longhorns. The atmosphere down here is crazy. You got red to the left, orange to the right. The town is completely divided. Now everyone who's been talking about the game from Oklahoma has talking about Baker Mayfield. Will he be on full expectation? Now, all the Texas fans have been talking about is, will this team get a big win for this rebuilding program? Now, this week's game will be at the famed Cotton Bowl, 3:30 Saturday afternoon. It will be anything but soft.
Thanks for that report on the big game, Garrett. We have a new segment this week called On This Day in college football history. For that, we send it to Brian Tonsoni.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Tonsoni. I'm bringing you a new segment called On This Day in College Football, probably more like on this week or in this 10-day span. From about October 5th through the 15th, there were some memorable games in college football. We'll start off on October 6th, 2007. Stanford defeats USC despite being the biggest point spread difference ever. USC was favored by 41 points, and the team coached by Jim Harbaugh, Stanford, defeats USC 24-23. On October 7th, 1915, Georgia Tech defeats Cumberland 222-0, the biggest margin of victory in college football. On October 6th, 1990, the 5th down, Colorado versus Missouri at Missouri. Colorado mistakenly was given a 5th down and scored a touchdown on the 5th down, leading them to victory. One of the biggest blunders in college football. Colorado uses that victory to get a piece of the national championship with Georgia Tech that year. And on October 15th, 1998, the Catholics versus Convicts game in South Bend, Notre Dame versus Miami. Miami had won 36 in a row, trailing late by 10 in that game, come back to make it a 1-point game on a touchdown. Coach Jimmy Johnson elects to go for 2 and is stopped by the Irish, giving the Irish a huge win, and Notre Dame goes on to win the championship. So a lot of things happen mid-October. Look for some crazy stuff to happen here this week and the next week, because October is a great month for college football. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Brian. A lot of major stories have taken place in college football history this week. All right, let's take a look at some key games of interest this week. We have Georgia Tech at Miami. The Hurricanes are coming off an emotional last-second victory over their rivals, Florida State, and they need to be careful of a letdown at home. Leading rusher Mark Walton was injured in the game against Florida State and is out for the season. And it's also not easy preparing for the triple option attack of the Yellow Jackets. Georgia Tech has won 3 in a row after a season-opening loss to Tennessee and would love to knock off a ranked team on the road. We also have Utah at USC. The Trojans will look to extend their home winning streak to 14 games this weekend against the Utes. Sam Darnold had a nice bounce-back game at home against Oregon State this past weekend, throwing for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Utes are coming off a tough loss at home to Stanford, but had to play without quarterback Tyler Huntley. Utah's chances of upsetting the Trojans may hinge on Huntley's availability. What do you have for us on Ohio State and Nebraska, Catherine?
The Buckeyes seem to have their groove back, especially on the defense side of the ball. Ohio State held Maryland to just 66 yards of offense last week. Nebraska gets its second shot in as many weeks to upset a top 10 team at home. The Cornhuskers cannot afford to turn the ball over like quarterback Tanner Lee's pick 6 to start the game last week.
All right, let's send it back to Jordan and Evan for their Who You Got this week.
All right, thanks for joining us this week for Who You Got, our new segment. Here we go. We're going to start asking Jordan here some questions about who you think is going to win this week. First, we got Georgia Tech versus Miami.
I got Miami because they will have so much momentum after coming back and beating Florida State last week.
How about Utah versus USC?
I have Utah. Utah has been a good team all year, and it's their time to shine.
How about Ohio State versus Nebraska?
I will take Ohio State in this one. I don't think Nebraska can stop the run game of the Ohio State Buckeyes.
What about for your upset of the week?
I got Purdue beating Wisconsin at Wisconsin because Purdue has a lot of momentum coming back and beating Minnesota last week.
That will do it for us this week. For Catherine Lang, I'm Dave Gilbert, encouraging you to get out there this weekend and cheer on your favorite teams. Thank you for watching Extra Points, a production of Delphi Bracketology and Student Union Sports. See you next week.